The crimson twin suns of Valdris Prime cast long shadows across the Galactic Military Academy's training grounds. Cadet Zara Chen adjusted her grip on the leather-wrapped handle of her katana, its ancient steel gleaming dully in the alien light. Around her, fellow cadets from dozens of species powered up their plasma weapons, energy blades, and neural disruptors. The familiar hum of advanced technology filled the air like a swarm of electric insects. Well, came a deep, mocking voice from behind her. Look what the primitive little human brought to advanced combat training. Zara didn't need to turn around to know who was speaking. Cadet Vex Thorn, a towering Kraxxan warrior standing nearly 8 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming like polished obsidian. His 4 arms crossed in perfect symmetry as he approached, each one capable of crushing steel. The other cadets began to gather around, sensing entertainment in the making. Is that supposed to be a weapon? Vex continued, his mandibles clicking with amusement. That rusty piece of scrap metal? Did you dig it up from some archaeological site? A few cadets snickered. Zara could feel their eyes on her, measuring, judging. The blade in her hands had been her great-grandmother's, forged on old Earth over 3 centuries ago. It had tasted blood in the last stand of Tokyo, had sung through the air during humanity's final desperate battles before joining the Galactic Union. But to these aliens, it was nothing more than a museum piece. At least my weapon doesn't need a power cell, Zara replied, her voice carrying just enough edge to cut. What happens when your fancy toys run out of juice, bug boy? Vex's compound eyes flared with indignation. His species, the Kraxxan, were proud warriors, descended from an insectoid race that had conquered half their galaxy before joining the Union. Being called bug boy by a human was the ultimate insult. Careful, little pink skin, Vex hissed, his translator giving his words a sibilant quality. That sharp tongue of yours might get you into trouble. Oh, I'm counting on it, Zara shot back, spinning the katana with practiced ease. The blade whistled through the air, a sound that made several nearby cadets step back instinctively. Instructor Korath, a blue-skinned Andorian with silver hair, approached the gathering crowd. His 3 eyes surveyed the situation with the weary patience of someone who had seen this exact scenario play out countless times. What seems to be the problem here, cadets? Korath asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. No problem, sir, Vex replied, his voice dripping with false innocence. Just wondering if the Academy standards have dropped so low that we're now accepting antique collectors. The crowd of cadets erupted in laughter. Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that showing weakness among predators was a fatal mistake. I see, Cora said slowly. Perhaps you'd like to test your theory, Cadet Thorn? A friendly sparring match to demonstrate the superiority of modern weaponry. Vex's mandibles spread wide in what passed for a grin among his species. I thought you'd never ask, sir. Excellent. Full contact. Adaptive armor. Neural safety protocols engaged. First to breach their opponent's defense wins. Kortha's third I fixed on Zara. Cadet Chun, are you willing to participate? Zara looked around at the circle of expectant faces. Humans were still the newest members of the Galactic Union, barely 2 centuries since first contact. They were seen as weak, primitive, emotional. Every human cadet carried the weight of their species' reputation on their shoulders. With pleasure, sir, she replied, bowing slightly in the traditional manner her sensei had taught her. The other cadets quickly formed a wide circle as both fighters moved to the center of the training ground. Automated systems descended from the ceiling, scanning both participants and adjusting the neural safety protocols. Vex's personal energy shield flickered to life, a shimmering barrier that could stop a plasma bolt cold. His primary weapon, a vibroglaive, hummed with barely contained energy. Last chance to back out human, Vex called out, I'd hate to damage such a precious antique. Zara said nothing. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the blade in her hands. 300 years of history, of sacrifice, of human determination. Her great-grandmother had faced impossible odds with nothing but steel and courage. Today, she would do the same. The starting signal echoed across the training ground. Vex immediately activated his glaive's energy field and charged forward, his massive frame moving with surprising speed. The crowd cheered as 4 tons of armored Kraxxan warrior bore down on the tiny human female. Zara waited and waited. At the last possible second, she sidestepped with fluid grace, her katana singing through the air in a perfect arc. The blade met Vex's energy shield with a shower of sparks and passed through it like it wasn't even there. The crowd fell silent. Vex stumbled, confusion evident in his posture. He looked down at his chest, where a thin line had appeared across his adaptive armor. As they watched, the line began to glow red, then orange, then white-hot. "Impossible!" someone whispered. Vex raised his glaive for another attack, but as he moved, his chest armor simply fell away in 2 neat pieces. Beneath it, his natural chitinous shell showed a hairline crack that hadn't been there moments before. "What kind of trickery is this?" Vex demanded, his voice rising in pitch. Zara smiled, a cold expression that would have looked perfectly at home on a shark. "No trickery, just good old-fashioned human engineering." She attacked again, moving like liquid lightning. Her blade found every gap in Vex's defenses, every weakness in his advanced armor systems. Each strike was precise, calculated, devastating. Within moments, pieces of the Kraxxan's supposedly impenetrable gear were scattered across the training ground like discarded toys. "Stop! Stop!" Vex cried out, backing away desperately. "Your weapon, it's not possible. Our sensors say it's just iron." "Oh, it is just iron," Zara agreed, advancing steadily. "Iron and carbon and chromium and nickel. But you see, there's something you don't understand about humans. We've been killing each other with sharp pieces of metal for over 5,000 years. We've gotten very, very good at it." She feinted left, then struck right. Vex's glaive went spinning from his severed grip as his hand guard shattered. The mighty Kraxxan warrior, terror of a dozen battlefields, found himself disarmed by a human female wielding what he dismissed as primitive scrap metal. The molecular structure, Instructor breathed, understanding dawning in his 3 eyes. The folding process, the carbon alignment. It's not just a blade. It's a masterwork of metallurgical engineering disguised as simplicity. "Exactly," Zara said, pressing the tip of her katana against Vex's throat, just below his translator unit. "While you were all focusing on energy weapons and plasma fields, we humans were perfecting the art of making really, really sharp things. This blade was folded 10,000 times. Its edge is aligned at the molecular level. It can cut through your fancy force fields because it doesn't generate energy signatures your defenses can detect or deflect." Vex's compound eyes were wide with something approaching terror. "But the Academy's censors, they classified it as primitive because that's exactly what we wanted them to think," Zara replied with a laugh that held absolutely no humor. "Rule number 1 of human warfare. Never let your enemy know what you're really capable of until it's too late." The crowd of cadets stood in stunned silence. Several of them were frantically checking their own weapons, suddenly uncertain about the effectiveness of their advanced technology against such an ancient, elegant solution. "Match concluded," Korath announced, though his voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. "Cadet Chen is the victor." Zara stepped back and bowed formally to her defeated opponent, then began cleaning her blade with cloth from her belt. The steel gleamed like liquid mercury in the alien sunlight. "That's impossible," a Zentorian cadet muttered. "Our briefing said humans were primitive, barely spacefaring." "Your briefings were wrong," Zara said without looking up from her blade. "We've been fighting wars since before your species discovered fire. The only difference is now we fight them among the stars." Vex slowly picked himself up from the ground, his pride as shattered as his armor. "This isn't over, human. The Kraxxan do not forget humiliation." "Good," Zara replied, sheathing her katana with a soft click. "I was hoping you'd say that." As the crowd began to disperse, whispers following in their wake, Instructor Korath approached Zara. His expression was unreadable, but she could sense a shift in his demeanor. Cadet Chen a word. They walked to the edge of the training ground, away from prying ears and curious eyes. Korath's 3 eyes studied her carefully, as if seeing her for the first time. That was either very brave or very foolish. he said finally. Sometimes there's no difference, sir. Indeed. Tell me, how many others know about your weapon's true capabilities? Zara considered the question carefully. Trust was a luxury she had learned not to indulge in easily, but something in the instructor's tone suggested this was important. Every human cadet carries weapons from old Earth, sir. We're not as primitive as the briefing suggests. Korath nodded slowly. I suspected as much. Your species has a talent for misdirection that our xenopsychologists completely missed. With respect, sir, your xenopsychologists made the same mistake everyone does. They assumed that primitive meant weak. And it doesn't? Zara's smile was all teeth and shadows. Sir, we humans have a saying. The most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone underestimates. A soft chime echoed across the training ground, signaling the end of the session. As cadets began filing toward the dormitories, Zara noticed that several of them were giving her a much wider berth than before. Word of her victory was already spreading through the Academy's complex social networks. Cadet Chen, Korath called as she turned to leave. Be careful. You just painted a very large target on your back. Sir, I've been carrying that target since the day I arrived. The only difference is now everyone can see it. As she walked across the training ground, her katana secured her side, Zara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The first blow had been struck, not just against Vex, but against the entire system that saw humanity as inferior. They wanted to see primitive weapons and savage instincts. Tomorrow, they would learn that humans had spent millennia turning both into art forms. But tonight, she had planning to do, because while she had won this battle, the war for humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning. And if there was one thing humans had learned in their long, bloody history, it was that the first victory was often the most dangerous. It made your enemies desperate, and desperate enemies made mistakes. Zara was counting on it 0.3 days after her victory over Vex. Zara discovered just how desperate her enemies had become. She was returning from advanced xenobiology when she noticed the subtle signs. Corridors that were mysteriously empty, automated systems that seemed to glitch at precisely the wrong moments, and the feeling of being watched that prickled along her spine like ice water. They were planning something. The question was what and when. Her answer came sooner than expected. Cadet Chen, report to Training Bay 7 immediately. Her personal communicator crackled to life as she entered her dormitory sector. Zara paused. Training Bay 7 was one of the older facilities, located in the Academy's lower levels where the surveillance systems were known to be unreliable. It was also currently supposed to be undergoing maintenance, making it officially off-limits to cadets. Acknowledged, she replied, but her hand instinctively moved to check her katana's position at her side. The journey to the lower levels took her through increasingly deserted corridors. Emergency lighting cast long shadows that seemed to dance with malevolent intent. By the time she reached Training Bay 7, every instinct she possessed was screaming danger. The bay door stood partially open, spilling harsh white light into the darkened corridor. Zara approached cautiously, her senses straining for any sign of movement or sound. What she found inside made her blood run cold. Vex stood in the center of the training bay, but he wasn't alone. Flanking him were 5 other cadets. 2 more Kraxxan warriors, a pair of Zentorian shock troopers, and a Vorthan assassin whose reptilian features were hidden behind a tactical mask. All of them were armed with military-grade weapons that definitely weren't Academy standard issue. Welcome to your remedial training session, human, Vex said, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. Class is now in session. Zara stepped fully into the bay, allowing the doors to seal behind her with a soft pneumatic hiss. The trap was sprung, but she had walked into it with her eyes wide open. 6 against 1? She asked, drawing her katana with deliberate slowness. I'm flattered, though I have to wonder what your instructors would think about this little study group. The instructors won't be a problem. The Vorthan assassin spoke for first time, his voice a sibilant whisper. The surveillance systems in this bay have been experiencing technical difficulties all week. How convenient. Zara tested the weight of her blade, feeling the familiar comfort of perfectly balanced steel. And I suppose this is all about restoring your wounded pride, Vex? Pride. Vex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. This isn't about pride, human. This is about maintaining order. Your species needs to understand its place in the galactic hierarchy. And what place would that be? At the bottom, one of the Centaurians sneered. Where primitives belong. Zara's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. Funny thing about being at the bottom, it gives you a really good view of everything above you, and an even better understanding of how far everyone has to fall. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. The Vorthan assassin struck first, his plasma daggers crackling with lethal energy as he moved within human speed. The Centaurians flanked left and right, their neural disruptors whining as they charged. Vex and his Kraxxan companions advanced directly, their vibroglaves humming with barely contained fury. For a split second, the outcome seemed inevitable. 6 highly trained alien warriors, armed with advanced weapons, against 1 human female with an antique sword. The mathematics of the situation appeared insurmountable. Then Zara moved, and mathematics became irrelevant. She flowed between the attacks like water finding its path through stone, her katana singing its ancient song of death. The Vorthan assassin's plasma daggers met her blade, and simply ceased to exist, their energy fields disrupted by steel that cut at the molecular level. His shocked expression was the last thing he wore before Zara's return stroke opened his throat. 1, she counted softly, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. The Centaurians recovered first, their military training overriding their shock. They separated and began a coordinated assault pattern, their disruptors sending waves of neural energy designed to shut down an opponent's nervous system. Zara danced between the beams like she was choreographing a deadly ballet, her blade intercepting and deflecting energy that should have been impossible to touch. How is she doing that? One of the Centaurians demanded. Simple physics, Zara replied, ducking under a crackling beam and striking upward in the same motion. Her katana found the gap between helmet and chest armor, and the Centaurian's question became permanently academic. Superconducting steel and a really good understanding of electromagnetic theory. 2. The remaining Centaurian tried to retreat, but Zara was already moving. Her blade traced a silver arc through the air, and his disruptor fell to ground in precisely cut pieces. A heartbeat later, he joined it. 3. That left the 3 Kraxxan warriors, Vex and his 2 companions. They had arranged themselves in triangle formation, their glaives creating an overlapping field of energy that should have been impossible to penetrate. Their chitinous armor gleamed under the training bay's harsh lights, and their compound eyes tracked Zara's every movement with predatory focus. Still feeling confident, human? Vex taunted, though there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice now. Oh, I'm feeling something, Zara replied, wiping her blade clean on a piece of cloth from her belt. But confident isn't quite the right word. Then what? Her smile was cold enough to freeze helium. Nostalgic. You see, this reminds me of a story my grandmother used to tell, about a samurai who faced impossible odds during the siege of Osaka Castle. She began to circle them slowly, her movements hypnotic in their fluid grace. He was outnumbered 50-1, surrounded by enemies, with nowhere to run and no hope of rescue. Do you know what he did? Died horribly, I imagine, one of Vex's companions sneered. Oh, he died, Zara agreed, but not before he killed 37 of his enemies and held the castle gates for 6 hours. They had to step over a mountain of their own dead just to reach him. She stopped moving and raised her katana in a formal guard position. The thing about humans, you see, is that we've never quite figured out when we're supposed to give up. It's a character flaw, really. The 3 Kraxxan attacked in perfect synchronization, their glaives weaving a web of destructive energy that turned the air itself into a weapon. For several seconds, the training bay filled with the sound of clashing steel and crackling energy as ancient technique met modern technology. Then Zara did something that should have been impossible. She stepped directly into the center of their formation, placing herself at the exact point where all 3 energy fields converged. Any normal weapon would have been vaporized instantly. Any normal person would have been reduced to their component atoms. But Zara's katana wasn't normal, and neither was she. The blade moved in a pattern too fast for the eye to follow, a technique called 1,000 cuts of the falling leaves that her sensei had taught her in the mountain monasteries of New Kyoto. Each strike found the harmonic frequency of the glaive's energy fields, disrupting them at the quantum level. Within seconds, 3 weapons that had cost more than a small starship were reduced to expensive scrap metal. 4, 5, 6. Vex fell to his knees, his natural armor breached in a dozen places, green blood seeping from wounds that would heal but would never stop aching. His compound eyes stared up at Zara with something approaching religious awe. "What are you?" he whispered. Zara cleaned her blade one final time and sheathed it with a soft click. "I'm a human, Vex. Just a human. And that's why you should have been afraid from the very beginning." She turned toward the training bay's exit, then paused. "Oh, and Vex, the next time you decide to hold a private training session, you might want to remember that humans invented guerrilla warfare. We've been fighting dirty since before your species learned to walk upright. The surveillance systems," Vex gasped. "You said they were malfunctioning." "They were," Zara confirmed with a laugh that held genuine amusement. "Right up until about 10 minutes ago when I fixed them. Every second of this little encounter has been recorded and transmitted directly to Academy Command. I'd estimate you have about 3 minutes before security arrives." The sound of running feet and shouting voices echoed from the corridor outside, growing rapidly closer. 2 minutes, Zara corrected. "You might want to think about what you're going to tell them, though I suppose the truth would be refreshing for a change." As she reached the exit, Vex called out one last time. "This changes nothing human. There are others, more than you can imagine. Your species is still outnumbered 1,000,000,000 to 1. Zara paused in the doorway and looked back at the scene of carnage behind her. 6 of the Academy's most elite cadets lay defeated by a single human with a sword her great-grandmother had carried into battle centuries ago. "You know what the funny thing is, Vex?" she said softly. "Those odds would have worried me yesterday. But today, after seeing how easily your advanced technology fails against simple steel and human determination, I'm starting to think 1,000,000,000 to 1 might not be nearly enough." She walked out into the corridor as security forces rushed past her toward the training bay. Behind her, she could hear Vex trying to explain the unexplainable to officers who would struggle to believe their own surveillance footage. 3 days later, Zara stood once again on the Academy's training grounds. Word of the incident had spread like wildfire through the complex social networks that connected the galaxy's various species. Humans were no longer seen as primitive newcomers to be dismissed and underestimated. They were now viewed as something far more dangerous, an unknown quantity with a proven capacity for violence. The other cadets gave her a wide berth, their conversations falling to whispers when she passed. But Zara noticed something else in their expressions now, not just fear, but respect, and perhaps more importantly, curiosity. Cadet Chen, Instructor Korth approached, his 3 eyes studying her with renewed interest. "Walk with me." They moved to the edge of the training ground, where the red suns of Alders Prime were setting behind the Academy's towering spires. "The Galactic Command Council has been asking questions," Korth said quietly, "about human capabilities, about your weapons, about what other surprises your species might be hiding." "And what have you told them, sir?" "The truth. That I don't know, and neither does anyone else. Your species' psychological profiles will need to be completely rewritten." Zara nodded. "We've been waiting for this conversation for 2 centuries, sir. Ever since first contact, we've known that eventually someone would push us far enough to show what we're really capable of." "And what are you really capable of, Cadet Chen?" She looked out at the alien landscape, at the strange stars that dotted an unfamiliar sky. Somewhere out there, among those distant points of light, was a small blue world where her ancestors had spent millennia learning to survive against impossible odds. They had faced ice ages and plagues, natural disasters and global wars. They had climbed down from the trees and walked upright, invented fire and steel, split the atom and reached for the stars. And now their children walked among aliens who thought that advanced technology made them invincible. "We're capable of whatever it takes, sir," she said finally. "We always have been." As if to punctuate her words, a group of human cadets emerged from the Academy's main building. Each of them carried weapons from old Earth. Sword and axes, spears and hammers, blades that had been forged in fires that burned centuries before the first alien starship had entered human space. They moved with the quiet confidence of predators who had finally revealed their true nature. The age of hiding was over. The galaxy was about to learn what it really meant to share space with humanity. And somewhere in the growing darkness, Zara could swear she heard the sound of her great-grandmother's laughter, carried on stellar winds across the void between worlds.